All righty. I'm live. I want to talk about the home recording versus commercial recording studio because I was motivated. Um, and we'll get into some more chat tonight as people start to pop in. Um, I started to write down I should have wrote down my notes before or my talking points before I got started, but oh well. Um, I know as people tune in, I know one thing I wanted to talk about was in this recording studio, whether you're doing it at home or in a commercial studio. One thing is gear and equipment. There's definitely no one size shoe fits all. In other words, there's no one piece of gear or piece of equipment that's going to work other than maybe a PC or a Mac. And even then, you have to decide if you're going to use a PC or Mac. That's the only probably one of the clear choices that you have to make in routing when it comes to doing your studio gear. So, what's going on, A Banks? How's it going? I'm doing the live thing of the home recording versus commercial studio. Um, the reason I wanted to talk about that because I think in some instances, um, we all are either doing commercial studio recording or we're doing home recording studio. Um, Home recording studio has become more popular. What's going on, Tactical Media? Um, and so forth. I think the home recording studio because it's more convenient to build a home recording studio is cheaper, doesn't take as much. Um, and here's the thing: most of us can get pretty much the same results doing the home recording studio route. That's the thing, but it also is genre dependent. In other words, if you are doing even R&B back in the 90s where I'll use some of the top producers like when I'll say Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis or Teddy Riley or Dallas Austin or uh Babyface and all that, even though they were still using outboard gear in the console, but a lot of the music was still sequenced with keyboards and drum machines, right? We know this. So um but in that time in the 90s, going 80s into the 90s, you still had to bounce it to a tape machine and mix to a tape machine. You still had to do it that way. But as DAW's gotten a ton better and they've gotten better with audio interfaces, now it's kind of like, well, and plugins are being more, there's easier to buy plugins than actual real outboard gear, right? So it's like, well, I really don't need to buy a ton of outboard gear or a console or even a tape machine anymore. But if you are doing like, for example, um, even in Nashville, where they still record bands, right, for country and western music, the only thing that they adapted is really an interface or maybe a hard disk recorder like a radar, and that's the only difference. They're going into Pro Tools or whatever the case, but they're still using a more outboard gear consoles and outboard gear. Um, and they still have live rooms where they're recording the band, right? So I want to get tonight's subject is going to be on everyone's thoughts of the home recording studio. What do you prefer? Um, and what are your thoughts? Do you want to do? Would you do a commercial studio? Um, and as people chime in and start giving their thoughts on that, I'll tell you here's my pros and cons to it. I think the pro to a commercial studio, just the building or the atmosphere, is commercial studios are when they're built, the live room and the control room is built right. It is hard to beat that atmosphere for recording. A lot of times, when we're at home, we are doing this. We're trying to find a space, in a bedroom, maybe an attic or basement, depends on where you live. Um, whatever case, you're trying to find a space. Some people do it in their living rooms. I've seen in the garage or whatever, even in a bathroom. Some people just finding a space. But we and I know when they're building houses, they don't think of your house. They're not thinking of recording studio when they're designing these homes. They're thinking kitchen, living room, bedrooms, bathrooms, and that's general, or maybe attic, basement, and a garage. The typical house, right? So we have to do what we can. But versus a commercial studio, that's what they're thinking about. Is exactly what they're building it for, to record. So ideally, that atmosphere is definitely going to be a better atmosphere for recording. I don't care what genre you're using. You don't have to have a gigantic live room especially if you're just doing like hip hop music. You might just want to have a vocal booth, at least a vocal booth to do the vocals. On that, you're in another room and you're just, you're using all the, the beats or whatever. But if you are a band and you're recording, a drum set, bass, guitar, and things like that, you're going to want the space. And that becomes the challenge for some people when it comes to this recording studio, right? So how's it going, DL? Of course, I'm live. I'm glad since you popped up, I saw that you wrote a comment about the live stream yesterday. That wasn't a live stream. That was me. I recorded that video. That was just a recorded video. That was not a live stream like I'm doing now. So if you were wondering that, but anyway, I'm doing good. We're talking about the home recording studio and the commercial studio. So, anyhow, so like I said, I'm gonna get everyone to chime in. Some people never been in a commercial studio that probably watch this channel. Some people actually never been in an actual physical recording studio. Most people have probably got on YouTube watching different videos, maybe come across channels like mine, and they know to buy certain gear, the interface, computer, the typical stuff, studio monitors, headphones, software, plugins, stuff like that. And they've been watching and learning, just that way. But I would say anyone if you ever get a chance to actually go to an actual commercial recording studio, you will immediately, as soon as you walk through the door, you're going to immediately get this sense of, I'm in a pro level area. It's like it's hard to describe. I remember the first time I stepped into an actual physical commercial recording studio, and that was in the 90s. It is a how can I say it? The atmosphere of it does give you this. It is a vibe to it. And I had a buddy of mine. He had a recording studio. This is when I was living in Texas, and they built this recording studio, and it was, sit at the console. It wasn't like just gigantic console. It was a Tascam console, but they still recording it. I was still in there. I was in there for hours. Recording, just doing and what I loved about was to be in there 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. But you and I know that a lot of times commercial studios, one of the cons to a commercial studio is that when you got a lot of clients, that you're on limited time. So you can go in there, maybe they might have your time session, unless you buy blocks of time. You can only be in there for, let's say, 3 months. You might have one particular control room, live room that you book for 3 months. After that, time is up. The great thing about a home recording studio is that, you know, with your home recording studio, you could be in it anytime you want because it's in your home. You own it. So like I said, I was just gonna, you know, that's what I really want to chime in on people's thoughts, but on the home recording and versus the commercial recording studio. Also, while y'all watching, let me know. I think one time I was doing a live stream, people said the audio was choppy. I wasn't sure if the audio was choppy or not. So you can give me people's thoughts on that too. Now, here's another thing. Just because I will say this too. Just because I'm talking about a particular subject doesn't mean we have to stay on that subject. If your interest in something else, gear, industry, something, we can talk about that too. If you have questions about that too. But let me know, everyone know. Definitely give me a thumbs up and share the video and all that. That helps the algorithm for my channel to, you know, as well. So I think more and more people are going to chime in because I think lately with these live streams, sometimes I start at 9, sometimes I start at 8, sometimes I start early, sometimes you know, so I got that's on me. Sometimes I could be a little inconsistent, which I got to get better with that. But you know, still human things happen. I got another camera. Haven't got a chance to plug it up yet. So let me while people are tuning in right now, I don't see any chats coming through, so I don't know if people are just watching me rambling. Because right now I'm just blah 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 blah. Right now I'm just talking. Because I like to get people's thoughts on, you know, what are your thoughts? Would you want to work in a home? Would you prefer your home recording studio? Or if the money was right, would you rather have a commercial studio, like a building and actually have that if it wasn't so costly to run one? I like to get people's thoughts on that. So you can chime in and give me your thoughts on that. Let me text this. He called. I got a call coming in. So I'm gonna let him know I'm doing my live stream. I'll call him back after I'm done. Okay. Okay. All right. So I had to make sure because people be calling, I have to ignore the call. So my question would you also, who's been on here that's actually been in a recording studio? Um, have you ever been to a commercial recording studio? I've been to a few of them. I'll tell you my thoughts on when I do go in there. Especially when you go in there, those recording studios. A lot of times when you go in the reception area, before you head into the live rooms or you're heading to the control room where the engineers are going to be, sometimes you go to the live room where they got assistants and all that, setting up the gear to get you to help start get ready for the recording session. You can see plaques, or you can see the, you know, the gold and platinum albums of different artists that have recorded there. And sometimes that can definitely be inspiring. You walk in there and you're like, man, this is the same recording studio that like Michael Jackson recorded at, like Westlake, for example, or Ocean Way. Or you go in there and see like Mariah Carey's, you know, albums on the wall, Janet Jackson's, you know, whatever the case. You might go in there, you see your favorite band, Toto, or whatever the case, you know, U2, AC/DC, or whatever. And a lot of times, what that does psychologically is, you know, that if you see those artists that recorded at recording studio and you know how good those albums, those music, the CDs came out, how the recording, how good they sound, you have a confidence that you know that your recording, if you record there, is going to come out just as good, especially if they have top-notch engineers. You know, it's going to come out good. A lot of times, if someone has a home recording studio, let's say you need to, and someone's going to record some stuff for you in their home recording studio, you don't always know if it's going to come out sounding as good as the commercial ones. But that's kind of a risk take. Sometimes people do this at home and build their own recording studio, not sure if their own recording is going to come out sounding commercial. So what I can say is there are things that you can do in your home recording studio if you know to do this to get your stuff to sound as comparable as the pros. And one of the things, even if you don't have a console, you're going to use the mixer's console in your DAW. There are things that you need to be doing, such as setting up auxiliary channels and bus channels. I can't stress how important that is, because when you set those channels up, the audio interface that sends out your sound reacts. It starts to sound more like a console when you do this. Some people have never known to do that. They'll record the tracks and they think they're supposed to do all the editing and everything in the tracking window. That's like trying to do all your editing on the tape machine. No, that's not where you're going to do all your mixing and all that. You're going to mix on the console. Well, you're trying to do the same thing in the DAW. So let me see. I would love to own a commercial studio. I'm not good enough to run an engineer mastering work, but I would be cool to be able to record artists and put them. Yeah, here's the thing. The only way you're going to get good at anything is to keep doing it and learn from your mistakes. For example, I'll give you a couple of, here's a thing that one of the things that it took me a while to understand this. Like the importance of a master bus compressor, right? They always call it the glue. I used to wonder before I started doing that, why my mixes sounded, they always just sound, they sounded mixed, but they didn't sound professional. So I learned to start using an actual bus compressor on my master bus. When I started doing that, I noticed a difference. Okay, we got the Scrooge. Welcome. So let me see. You're asking, am I saying to send a Vox track to an aux? Yes. Yes. I would say this. Let's say you have your vocal, and this is done all the time. Let's say you have a vocal on, I'll say like I'm on my console, right? Let me move my headphones. Let's say I got vocals on channels 9, right, and 10, right? Let's say I got a lead vocal. Let's say there's no backgrounds, it's just a lead vocal. It's on track 9 and 10. Well, you're not going to put your delays and reverbs on that channel. You're not going to insert your reverb and delays on that channel. What you're trying to do is send that channel to an auxiliary channel that's gonna work coincide with those channels. So that way let's say I'll make 17, 18 an auxiliary channel. So now on 17 I got a reverb, 18 I got a delay. So now I can blend the reverb and the delay along with that vocal chain. You will be amazed the difference that makes in your vocal mix. So yes, you definitely want to do that. If you're putting because if you're doing that, if you're putting your effects on the vocals on the same channel, all you're going to do is start to muddy up, and you're going to make this. It's going to have this weird effect on the vocals. This is how they're able, an engineer is able to bring out, and how they're able to still get this effect of whatever reverbs and delays and whatever the case they're using, doublers and whatever the case, and still have clear vocals that cut through the mix. Is because the main vocal is not being affected by anything. You might insert a compressor, maybe an EQ, something like that on the channel, because what you're trying to do is you're definitely trying to control dynamics, and you're definitely trying to control clarity. In other words, if you had a vocal, let's say your EQ, your high, mid-low, and your low, let's say your high is sitting at about 7,500, maybe 10K or whatever, 12K. Your mid high may be sitting about 4K or whatever. Mid low maybe about 600, and then your lows might be 200. Well, you might have to cut or attenuate any of those frequencies. So that's what you're going to insert on that channel, as well as the compressor is designed to control. You're trying to compress dynamic peaks, volume levels. That's what a compressor is for. That's why it's called a compressor, right? We're trying to control that. Other than that, you're going to send that vocal out to an auxiliary to blend with the main channel. To it's kind of like if you've been in a room and you hear a singer, and you can hear the singer, but if you're in this big echoing room, you can still hear the room echoing, but you can still hear the main vocals clearly. That's the same concept. If that makes sense. So I like being in the home studio as being pre-production studio, as get your beats, vocal practice, you got you, and record, master the commercial. You can do that. There are people that do that because they want to. In the end, they're still trying to get the high-end commercial sound. Welcome back to Hats. We're just talking about commercial studios and recording all together. Okay. Definitely send my verbs and delays. Yeah, you definitely want to do that. Try it. I don't care. Whatever DAW you got, Logic Pro, Studio One, Pro Tools, whatever DAW you're using, set up your buses and auxiliaries. You definitely want to set your auxiliaries. Auxiliary channels is where you want to send headphone mixes. That's what they call them Q mixes, and that's where you send your reverbs and delays to auxiliaries, and those return back on different channels, and you blend those. Yep, for sure. I was just recording some guitar. Okay, cool, nice. So I was, when it comes to the home recording studio and the commercial studio, for a long time, welcome Andre, for a long time when I was doing this, because I've always had a home recording. I started my home recording studio to start doing actual recording probably back in 2001-ish when I started buying gear. But I used to wonder why when I was doing stuff at home, welcome Concrete Game. I used to wonder, why do my stuff don't sound like the commercial studios? I've been in commercial studios, but I was like, I can't get the same results like they're getting. What are they doing that I'm not doing? So I was like, what am I doing what are they doing? And there's certain key things that they were doing that I wasn't doing. And one of those things was setting up auxiliary and bus channels through my mixer. I wasn't doing that. What I was doing was I would record my tracks. And I mostly was using Cakewalk for the most, but it doesn't matter what DAW. They all generally work the same, Cubase or whatever. They all generally work the same. I would record my tracks, and then after that, I would just kind of put a little EQ loop, reverb, on the master, and maybe I would put a little bit of compression, whatever, and that was it. I would call myself mixing it, and then I would print it. And I'm like, it would sound like a song, it would sound like a song, but it didn't have that polished, professional commercial sound I was hearing. I'm like, when I would listen to some CDs or whatever, I'm like, their sound, it was evident they recorded in a commercial studio. And I'm like, it was evident it was evident I was recording at home. The idea for a home recording studio is you're trying to make people think it sounds like a professional commercial studio, even though it's done at home. The ideal is, because the commercial studios are the ones that set the standard for professional recordings, is a commercial recording studio. So we're trying to do the same thing. These companies that sell gear, DAWs and all that, they never tell you this. It's kind of like if I sell you a camera, a Canon or a Nikon, I don't care if you know how to use it. Most people can buy a camera like that and don't know how to use, like, for example, go to the histogram or whatever, or I'm gonna go back there and I'm going to use for example, I'm going to check for vignetting in the photo or whatever, or I'm going to check for depth of field or dynamic range and all this, or what proper lenses, and on top of that, lighting and everything else, flashes, strobes, backdrop, diffusers, all this stuff that makes professional recording, professional photography. They don't tell you that. They just say, well, if you want a Nikon D6, okay, I'll sell you one. You know, $7,000. Now you got this camera and you don't even know how to use half the functions. And the same thing with a DAW. You go buy Pro Tools and don't realize Pro Tools does all this stuff, and you're like, oh, I didn't know it could do that, because they don't tell you that. They just, you want a Pro Tools? Okay, here, there's $5.99. That's how anybody, it's kind of buying a car. They don't care if you know all the features of the car. Most of them salesmen don't even know half the features of the cars they sell. They just, it's a GMC Yukon Denali. Okay. I didn't know that the pedals actually can, you can adjust the pedals. They didn't know that either. So moving on, there go DL doing his thing. Here you go, racing your stuff, man. People might be thinking the same you're thinking. So anyhow, so welcome Eric Summers. So he said DAWs definitely work the same, but Harrison Mixcraft seem to have a sound of me. I love Logic for mixing, but it's very sterile. Okay, I got you. Workflows and DAWs. People tend, when it comes to DAWs, people tend to like DAWs more when they learn the workflow of it and the east, in other words, they learn the ins and out and they get really good at it. They kind of like it better. Most people don't like a DAW when it's hard to get around through it, right? So it's really very, very dependent. It's very dependent on that DAW. And it really what features you're looking out of it, because technically, like I said, most DAWs generally work the same, but some DAWs have more features than others. But as far as, here's this big argument too about, we always said analog versus digital, when really the argument should be analog versus digital conversion, because digital itself is not sound. Is binary. It's just ones and zeros. But how well the sampling rate and the conversion of digital, going from analog to digital, is what you're hearing a difference in. This is the reason why you can have a cheap $50 audio interface and it'll sound okay. Then maybe you get an Apogee Symphony and you wonder why you can, sounds a ton better when you're doing your stuff. It's because of the processing. And things like that. It's because of what that interface can process and how well it can, handle the sampling rate and everything else. There's a lot of key things to why the better audio interfaces sound better. Like, for example, I went from my Behringer Firepower to my Marketer Unicorn. I got the Motus. They sound better. You hear a lot more details in the recordings and the mixing and everything else with better interfaces. It's just, I hate to be because I'm a type of person, I would never tell anyone that you couldn't do what you would if you bought some lower price gear. But I have to say this, gear partially does matter, including your converters, including your PC or Mac. Because what good is having having state-of-the-art everything if your PC or Mac can't handle the processing, right? So I think this is the reason why everyone's really big on the Mac with the M3, M2, M4 chips and all that, because the processing. Let me see. I want to go back to what else Eric said about the Harrison, because you know what, it's kind of like Harrison, they got something in their program, their algorithm, in their programming. They got this saturation. It almost sounds like analog with Harrison Mix Bus, which I like. Sounds a little bit more authentic to me. So compared to some of the other DAWs, but you have to have a really keen ear to used to hear an analog to really hear it. Let me see. Got a couple more. Let me see. So dolls don't have a sound, but they do have a different workflow, which is what you might mean when they sound different. And like I said, here's the thing: you could take it the same doll. If you want to hear difference, change. And I'm not talking about like going from like a Behringer Euphoria to like a Personas audio box, right? Or even a Focusrite 2i2 or something like that. You want to hear some more distinctive difference. It's like when I play something through like the Behringer and then I play it through my Antelope Orion. That's where I hear tremendous difference in what I'm listening to, but that's like going from a $300 interface to that Antelope Orion. It was a $3,500 interface. So the conversion and the clocking and everything else. So that's where you're going to start hearing different. It's the conversion. So let me see what else we got. I'm kind of scared because you're going to erase it. So I'm kind of scared to read it. The deal says several let me read before you erase it. Several creators have made videos debunking the sound of different doll. They say there's no difference after measuring the signal they ran. Yes, because it's not the doll. I've heard people all the time say, man, I got Pro Tools because it sounds good, or I got Reaper, or I got Logic Pro. But it's like if I got a $200 Behringer Euphoria and I'm trying to listen to this Logic Pro, and then I switch to my Antelope, and I'm like, of course the Antelope's going to sound better. It's a better converter. Here's another thing that's probably not talked about enough. If you change speakers, it's going to sound different. The speaker placement is going to make it sound different. The room that you're in will make it sound different. So there are so many factors to what makes recording sound good. Believe it or not, the actual source, whether it's the singer, a male or a female, the instrument they're using. In other words, you can have a guitar player. One guitar is playing a Telecaster and another guitar player playing a Strat. Well, Telecaster and a Strat sound totally different. That's going to make a difference. The amp that the guitar player is using, a Fender versus a Marshall, that's going to be different. If it's a solid state amp versus a tube amp, the strings, how the guitar is set up, the type of strings, are there, light strings? Are there same thing with the bass? Is it fretless? Is it using round wound strings or using, what type of, pickups are they using? Humbucker pickups or whatever the case? How's the bridge? Is it a rosewood neck type of tuners on the bass? What kind of strings he's using on that bass? Is he using, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on some of the strings. I got to go buy some strings for my 6-string anyway. That will make an effect to the recording. The microphone, using a solid state microphone versus a tube microphone versus a ribbon microphone. All of these factors matter, even if you're recording through your DAW through an interface, right? All of that matters in the equation. The preamps I'm going to use matters. So that's why sometimes when people do comparison tests, it's kind of like if I compare plugins to outboard gear, I'm listening through Focal speakers, right? Well, if I do the same comparison and listen through a pair of ATCs, if they're going to sound different with the same test, they're going to sound different. It's kind of like if I, with speakers. So I can be in a car that has Bose, jump in another car that has Clarion, another car that has Kenwood versus another car that has JVC. Those speaker systems are going to sound totally different. And here's the thing, psychologically, when we get used to hearing stuff, our minds we start making decisions based on what we're hearing and not realizing there's so many factors. It would take a long time because there's so many combinations in the recording process. It would take a long time to get an accurate test on everything, because it's kind of like I'm going to try this preamp with this preamp with this preamp, right? I'm going to do a shootout. But if you don't try different microphones, you're going to make a decision based on a preamp just based on that one microphone. And that is not, because just because you have a Neumann U87 microphone going through a 730, a Neve 1073, doesn't mean that U87 is going to sound good going through a Universal Audio 610 preamp. They're two different preamps. And you might make a bad decision and say, the Neumann U87 don't sound good going through a Neve 1073. I just didn't like it. And then someone else will say, I used the Neve 1073 through a U87 through a 1073, it sounded great. But also, what they're not saying is, well, ask the guy with the U87 microphone that didn't like it, well, what was your console? What's an SSL? What else did what else else in the vocal chain? Well, I was using the Tube Tech. Just because you have a Tube Tech doesn't mean it always works. A Tube Tech CLB doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to switch to 1176 compressor in that vocal chain. That can make a difference in how that U87 microphone sounds, right? So let's see. Mixed Club said, yeah, it's the last 2% of the puzzle. Yeah, it's kind of like it's a whole combination of things. I don't know people that are into cars like me. I'm a big time mechanic guy, right? I build engines and all that. So I'm into race engines and all that. And I always say this, just because you buy one set of cylinder heads with this one cam and this intake, and the car runs like crap, even though you can have high-end, high-performance racing parts on that engine, you can sometimes it's like, well, who made the cam? It was made by Lenati. Switch over to a comp cam, or run a different set of heads with different intake, and all of a sudden the car runs like a beast. It's the same thing. It's like, I didn't like everything, and all of a sudden you realize, I got this console, I got this microphone, this preamp, and I just don't like the way it sounds. Not realizing it could be, did you switch out their studio monitors? Because I'm paraphrasing what Andrew Shep said. All what really matters is what's coming out the speakers. Well, what do we listen through? The speakers, right? So if you change out the speakers, that might make all the difference in the world. How the speakers are set up. So let me get back to Jazzy Lamel wrote something. He said, the Intel chip 9 can beat the Mac on its best day. I use it every day. I have no issues, but you have to configure it correctly. And once you did it's done, you're okay. Gotcha. Because the Mac, there's Mac with the M1, M2, M3, and then of course there, the PC with a lot of times using i5 or i7, whatever. And a lot of times, if your PC can do 64 gigs of RAM versus 32, that makes a difference if you have more RAM in your PC, or same thing with your Mac. So yeah, that matters too. Matthew said, yeah, monitoring is insane. Some high spec speakers astound me with the clear. Yeah, it's kind of like, you think about it. I would say this. I'll go back to my cameras as an example, right? I'll go back to my cameras. before I really got into photography, I was using like really, point and shoot cameras. But when I really start getting into photography and I start using actual pro level DSLR cameras with different lenses and stuff like that, the photos that I was taking was coming out. It was like they were pro level photos. I'm like, these are turn out was because I upgraded to better camera system. So yeah, we got a lot of we got some okay, I got some comments. Sometimes these comments come in faster than I can read them. The mix club. I have received more mixes as of late that folks are clipping their folks. I'm trying to get them to understand that they're clipping on the way in. What's hard is they are deaf. They just don't hear. Well, it's kind of like, when it comes to that, I'll say one of my biggest pet peeves is like if I do a song and I send someone to a song and they want to listen to it on their phone, right? You're not going to hear anything accurate on your phone. The speaker, you know how tiny that speaker is? You're not going to get any depth and hear all the nuances of the mix and the song through a iPhone or an Android. You're not. You should be least minimum listen to us on at least a set of computers, computer speaker monitors minimum. But I prefer to listen to a hi-fi stereo system so you can actually hear everything. But yeah, that's yeah. So I can believe that. And then on top of that, they're just not watching when you send a clipping. They're just not watching how they're recording too hot, because they think that if they don't record hot or not. Yeah, I get it. Some people might try to reduce the noise floor, whatever, but all that just comes with experience. He says, like talking to yeah. I mean, I trust me, I believe it. Let me see. Maddie says, but I guess we just all work with what we got in the way we want. That's what's cool about all. Yeah, it's true. And you can only work with what you can only work with what you can afford. There's a lot of stuff that I still want that I can't afford. Like I can't afford $10,000 ATC speakers. They're pricey, yet alone the $25,000 studio monitors, sometimes somebody say, well, you don't really need, and for what I got, it works. But are they the best studio monitors? No, but you just like you say, you work with what you got. Let's see. A 1999 Chevelle 396 old school, still old school, built from 19. Oh yeah, you got a 396, man. All you do is slap a Demon 750 carburetor on that and run a set of 410 rear end gears and maybe a 4-speed with overdrive. And it depends on if you a track person or you like to cruise. But that's a cool car. 1969 Chevelle 396 big block. That's a cool car. Let's see. So let me see. Let me see. I also have the old W30. Oh yeah. You're talking about the Olds W30 with a 455. Yeah, Olds Cutlass 455 sitting in the barn. That's cool. So let me see. Okay, we got. Let me see. Let's see. Okay, we got. Okay, they're just going back and forth. Okay, the mix club. I start on tape. All I miss about tape is nothing. But I miss tape mixing on console more for the workflow. Like I said, I was talking to the owner of Recording Studio 1979. I don't know if y'all are familiar with his recording studio. It's called Studio 1979. He's in Nashville, and he's a big tape guy. He loves tape. He loves working and fixing and maintaining tape machines. I like tape machines too because that's what I started with, tape machines. But I have to agree with the Mix Club. What I don't miss about tape is the lack of editing. It's the same thing with even ADATs. ADATs, you still can't edit like you can in a DAW. There are hard disk recorders that will allow you to do a little bit more editing, but not to the near of what you can do in like Pro Tools or Logic or any DAW. You just, tape is just, a DAW will blow rings around tape when it comes to editing. And that's the most important feature for us in recording is editing. Because if you ever watch how they used to edit tape, it was called razor blade. And oh man, I would cringe when you see them take a razor blade and start chopping up tape. Even though people would get really, really good at editing with a razor blade. The fact that one of those reels, $250, $300 or whatever, and you chop it up to move certain tracks around. I'm like, that's why they call it in DAW. That's why it's called non-destructive, because it's the Control Z button, right? The undo button, right? I can undo, but tape sounds so good, especially when it's calibrated. The heads are clean. It's maintained. Once you got a good working tape machine, you record, especially recording a band or whatever to tape and coming to the console and using outboard gear. It sounds really, really good. But because of the abilities of what DAWs can do, Pro Tools, Cakewalk, Harrison Mixbus, you name it, Mixcraft, Cubase, we know them all, Logic Pro, all the big ones, Reaper. Once you've worked in that environment, it's kind of hard to, and especially if you have really nice converters, it's kind of like, do I miss tape? Not really. I would, if I had a good deal on a tape machine, yeah, I would own one. Would I use it? Probably from time to time. But would it be like no, not really. Because I'm getting amazing results recording in the DAW. But I do like tape machines because I know them very well. So let's see. We got some more comments on. Yep. I came through in the 2000s, right when things were changing. Okay, got you, man. Yeah. Like I said, I hate to give my age, but I started sequencing in 1989. The first tape machine I worked on was a 4-track. This is 1986. So, yeah, Miss Crump, yeah, you got me. I'm 50. Well, I'm 55, so you got me beat by 4 years. So I'm 55. So I started recording on a 4-track in the 80s. You grew up as a teenager. I've seen all the changes through gear and the music industry and all that too. So I would say, I'm gonna make a joke, but you think about, look at my room, right? Look at my environment. That ought to tell you I'm old, right? Only old people set up their home recording studio like this. So I'm gonna say that there are some young people that still have a console with racks of gear, but not very many. Most younger people, I would say 25, whatever case, they're going to have a very simple setup. They're going to have a Mac or PC, an interface, a microphone, a controller, and plugins. That's what I've seen with a lot of younger people in this. Older people tend to like, I got to have console. I got to have outboard gear. That's just, and it's part of what we used to, what we like. Let me see. I got Jazz at DLC. I'm see if I'm missing some questions. Oh, Jazzy says, I have a question. Do you think commercial studios are even relevant? Because nowadays nobody wants to pay for them. So this is why everyone is doing this, doing the do it, with home. I think, I was sitting there, and I'm going to be kind of long-winded on this. I'm going to be kind of long-winded on this on that question that you were asking about the relevancy of commercial studios. Because like I said, I went to one just a couple of days ago to go to an AES show in Nashville. And even though it was not set up for recording, you know, they were in a live room and everyone had a bunch of tables where they were selling gear. The control room still had an SSL Origin and they still had some rack gear, but it wasn't like it wasn't complete. Like it didn't look like your typical control room. I think that was because of the event. And I went downstairs to one of the other recording studios where they had some more stuff set up in another control room and live room, and same deal. But let me tell you, when I walked in there, and you can see all the heavy hitters. You know, I mean, you had people. There was Jim Croft. There was a few other people. I'm drawing a blank on the names, like people that do professional recording, commercial studio acoustics and all that. But there were some big people there. Like I said, the owner of 1979, I bought one of his vinyls there. It was there. Welcome to Night Studio 1979. Some of these studio owners were there. But when walking there, I could hear the ambience of the room immediately. Like, man, the first thing I was thinking in the live room, like, man, I wish the ambience in there. It's like, man, if I could only have if I had a live room like this. Of course, it was designed for professional recording. So I would say to try to shorten my answer on that is, if you are still looking for that commercial recording studio recording vibe, and yes, but you're exactly right as far as pricing. I think that's the only thing that killed recording studios is paying $75, $150, $200 an hour. And there are people still trying to charge that. And people just don't have that kind of money. I know a lot of times you would think someone saying $75 an hour, right? But when it comes to recording, it can take 12 hours just to get one song recorded. It sounds crazy. You would think, these people come in there, this band, they got all these songs. They got all these songs. They got 12 songs they're going to do. They've rehearsed them over and over. But when they get into the recording studio, they start recording. If the drummer misses a lick, they got to stop the recording, start over, or whatever, or they got to do some overdubs or whatever. You'll be amazed how fast, before you know it, you done ate up the time for that day. And it's very, very easy to do. I've had a few of my artists over here, and we'll start at 5, and before you know it, it's 11 to 12 o'clock at night, and we're still fixing vocals. The time can go by like that, and you're talking $75 an hour, right? That's on the low end for these commercial studios. So if I sit there and let's say $75 an hour, right? Let's do the math on that. If someone's faster with their calculator than I am, 75 times, let's say you do a 12-hour lockout, right? That's $900, right? And so now you're going to need to book the studio for at least 3 to 4 weeks, if not longer, maybe a couple of months. Where you're talking, so I'm gonna do $900 times 60 days, right? Now we got over $50,000, $54,000. That's at the $75. Now imagine if a studio is charging $150 an hour, right? $150 an hour. Now you do the math, and now you double that. Now we're, instead of 75, now we're 150. Now we're talking, so $900, $1,800. You double that. Now we got to $100,000 for 2 months. And that was the average. That was the average cost. If Madonna or, I would say Madonna or Mariah Carey or Mary J. Blige or Justin Timberlake, I don't matter. Any of these artists been in these recording studios for 2 to 3 months working on these albums, and they're in there 12 hours at a time. And it's 3-4 months. Yeah, the budget came up to $150, but that's why they got $150, $200, $300,000 advance to pay for the studio time. And some people say, why do recording studios charge it? Because you think about it, even if you're running, that's wear and tear on the gear because the gear is never turned off. You're constantly unplugging gear. You're constantly using the gear. It's not like when I turn my gear is turned on and off. Sometimes I don't turn my gear on for weeks. It's not being worn and torn like that. But the commercial is there. It's being used every day, all day. They never turn it off. And that's why sometimes channels go down and they have to pull a channel out or swap a channel, swap a piece of rack gear, whatever, because all of a sudden it just failed because electronics are electronics, right? So that's the reason why I would say and nowadays people just don't have the budget like that anymore. That's why most people say, well, it's easier just to do this at home because it's way cheaper. And now everyone is doing what they're doing. They're doing what they can to make their home recording studios compete with a commercial studio, which it can be done. I've proven that time and time again. So I hope that was kind of my long answer to that question. So welcome Maine 257. It says I'm 65, but I still don't know enough. Well, you got to remember, I remember you telling me that you kind of got started with this later. I'm 55, but I actually got started doing this when I was 25. So I've been doing this for 30 years, right? So I got a head start. I got a buddy of mine, he's a bass player. He's really getting into the recording stuff, the recording studio stuff. And he just now are learning about DAWs and all that. And he's in his 60s. And he said, man, I had an advantage. I got started when I was 24. So, and that's when I started working on the Different Taste album that we did. So I had an advantage to start working in a recording studio then. Let me see. See, we're all good here. Never mind. Having any okay. Let me see. Gotcha. We got a lot of. Okay, at least Elias says, "What do I think about Access Analog?" I don't know. I know there are people that do that where you can, you access an analog gear by connecting through the internet, and it links you through some actual analog gear, then you can use it. But I kind of like, my only downside to that is you can only use it when you can access it. And if you can't access it because you got to pay for it and all that, what happens when you need to use it and you can't access it? So I prefer to just buy gear myself. I'd rather just buy gear and own it. So that way I can always have access to it, if that makes sense, versus trying to do it through online. If that kind of answers your question on that. Let me see what else. Oh yeah, he's saying, yeah, Maddie says time rips through studio. Yeah, you'd be amazed. You thinking sometimes people thinking, oh, all I need is a couple hours. Even if you're just laying down some overdubs, I've seen where someone is laying down, let's say they're singing a line. Let's say and they need to go back and fix a couple of lines that they sung. And they go back and they're singing it and they're still not quite nailing it. And before you know it, okay, all right, we're going to go back. Okay, let me click. Are you ready? All right, here we go. Our recording. And they'll sing a line, and after we'll listen to it. No, that didn't really, okay. All right, let's go back. Before you know it, you start at 5. Before you know it, it's 7:30. Before we nailed it, it's been 2.5 hours. Before we nailed it, like, okay, finally, I like that one. Okay, we're going to keep that one. And that's how fast the time can go by. And this is the reason why someone thinking they're going to have a studio, they're going to go to commercial, I'm only going to need it for a day. That ain't always the case. So, okay, Matthew said medium studios in Australia are about $800 a day. Okay, I got you. Which is still, you think about that, $800 a day. And let's say I'm only going to be in that studio for a month. I just need that studio for a month, right? $800, right? Let's say times 30 days. That's still $24,000. $24,000 to record that album. 30 days is actually pretty short for a 10-song album, but it can be done. Sometimes people go in there and they can nail the band. Excuse me. The band can nail their parts within 2 or 3 days, but then it's all the overdubs and the vocals and the background vocals and all the other parts that might start to eating up the rest of the time. And then on top of that, once it's recorded, it's still got to be mixed. And then when it's mixed, it's still got to be mastered. So that it was very, very, very costly. So Max says that's why I just do stuff. He said ain't no one recouping either. That's why I just do my stuff. I'm the same way. I mean, I'm a one-man show. But I don't know how much long that's gonna last. Okay, Max said I started on 15 something. Okay, cool. So you've been in about as long as I have. It's a mixed up. I went on the road when I was 17. Again, agent booked us in North Dakota in the winter. Now playing Holiday Inn, Hotel Man. It was bad. I don't think that's even a thing anymore. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I used to play in this band, and we had a booking agent, and we used to do a lot of frat parties too. The frat parties pay better than the clubs. Like we used to play on 6th Street in Austin. But they didn't play as much. They didn't pay as much as the frat parties. So I remember those days. But it does get old always being on the road. It can get old. That's why sometimes artists be exhausted coming off the road after touring so long. So let's see. I see what you're saying as far as rock bands in Australia where people were I think not just in Australia, but in general, all over the world, people were bands. I think today music is still wanted, but it doesn't have the value that it deserves and respect like it's supposed to have. And I think that's an issue because let's think about the amount of money to build a top-notch studio. But people don't think about that. On top of that, imagine about the amount of time it takes to record and mix and all of these things to come up with the entire process to give people good music. The artists, these people that are writing these songs, the amount of talent it takes to become an excellent musician or an excellent vocal, the amount of time and effort. And then on top of that, the amount of money it costs for the gear, the commercial, the building, or doing it at home or whatever, the amount of money you spend to create music to give people this great music and they don't want to pay for it. They think it should be free. The amount of work you put into it and they think it should be free. I'm like, so y'all give me y'all thoughts on that. Let's see. So, Titan, you think AI is going to give it value? I don't know. How would that do that? When AI is not real, how can value be in something that's not real? I don't know. Just give me your thoughts on that. So Jasmine said, in your opinion, can you charge for your current studio clothes too, or the same rate as a commercial studio now, since you can do everything that the commercial studios can do? Here's the only reason why I would not charge a commercial studio. Even though a lot of people say, well, you'll be undervaluing your skill set and everything else, even though I know I can pretty much get the same results. The reason being is because it's the stereotype that it's my environment of my home. But I think that can change. If I had enough artists that recorded here that are on the charts, then that would change. But as of now, no. It's because they just wouldn't take it serious. Even though I know you should take it serious. But I'm talking about artists and producers. It's not fair, but that's just what it is. It's kind of like in their mindset, when you got this producer and artist, like I'll use Mariah Carey as an example, and her manager and her producer. Mariah Carey has been used to going into a recording studio building that has an SSL or a Neve. You know, they got, you know, all the expensive high-end gear, top of the line microphones in a recording studio like that. And I start saying, I don't have an LA2A, but I have the Lindell Audio 2As, which are clone versions of it. They're not going to take you seriously. They're just not. Even though I can record some stuff and it'll sound just as good as the commercial studio, they just not going to take it seriously, which is a shame. But that's just the nature of the music industry. Now, I happen to do some artists. We do music, and it starts doing well, and they want to know where it came out, and they realize it came out of my studio. Then people will eventually start to respect the studio and like, oh, not realize it's not about the name of the gear. It's about the name of what's being done coming out that recording studio. But anyhow, so let me see. Oh, you said not even want to free, but most people don't even listen to the whole way through. Well, you know, that's almost like some people got. It's like when they watch my videos, they don't even watch. A lot of people don't even watch my videos all the way through because I go back and look at the analytics of YouTube, and the average, like if I do a 25-minute video, the average amount of watch time is about 6 to 8 minutes. So they're not even watching my videos all the way through. And there's explain why sometimes I'll get questions. People asking a question about something that I did on a video that I've already answered the question, but it was later in the video. But they didn't stick around to watch the video to answer their question that they have for me. But that's just, I don't know. People have short attention spans. Matthew says AI sucks. I think AI, if it was done right, could be a very useful tool. But I think, like anything else, sometimes when you abuse that tool, then, you know. Let me see, go back to Tagaman says he will make real artist music most valuable as people get tired of easy to make music. Yeah, I agree. I think people are starting to see that now. I think that's the reason why, even with America, Idol, The Voice, America's Got Talent, and shows like that where there are people singing, because people still want to hear real singers. That's just, so I think people are starving for real talent. They just, they're starving for real musicians. They're starving for real talent. Because they realize the bubblegum stuff is just too generic. I'm seeing that. So, oh yeah, the mix up said YouTube better do something with AI, like history, and all the videos they're feeding me is AI. So yeah, it's kind of like, you think about it. Half the video, there's so many videos that they're popping on YouTube that I see that are AI. And you know there'll be like for example, one AI video had this one guy where this guy was a bodybuilder, but he was like 20 feet tall. Now you name one human being that's 20 feet tall. There ain't a single human being that's ever been 20 feet tall. You knew it was AI. They had one video where they had this one bus that fell off a bridge. And I'm like, if that was real, that would have made international news. That would have been catastrophic. But it was AI. So sometimes people start generating AI where, AI is not only going to start trying to replace musicians and music. You think about it, if you have someone create AI, imagine how much AI they're going to do in the movies. Why would I need to pay a stunt double? I could just get an AI image and use graphic imaging and everything else and, have a fake AI person doing all the stunts. They're doing that now. Just like with green screens. Those half the movies where you see someone flying or all this impossible stuff, that's not even real background. That's fake background. These people are in front of a green or a blue screen. But they've been doing that for like 30 years with the blue and green screen. So let me see. What else we got? Yeah, I like I said, I'm have to agree with let's see. There's just, because AI is trying to emulate what humans, artificial intelligence is, versus we're human. So we're drawn to human instinct. That's just a natural, whatever the case. Elliot says, do you think UAD plugins will ever truly match their hardware counterparts? Not really. No software can actually match real hardware. And I'll tell you why. Because what makes the real hardware is the electronics, period. Software doesn't have electronics. It's just code. So when you listen to software, you're listening to an emulation. You're listening to an AI. Now, here's the key thing. The artificial stuff that you're listening with plugins and things like that have gotten good enough to fool the average ear. And that's the reason why it works. It's kind of like a reverb, as an example. If you get a plug-in reverb versus a real reverb unit, well, it's gonna sound like a reverb unit. Long as it sounds like what it is emulating, this is what's become accepted. It's almost like it sounds like a bass guitar. There are plugins that sound like authentic bass guitars, even though they're not real bass guitars. But when I'm playing my actual bass guitar compared to a plug-in bass guitar, there are things that are done when you're playing on the strings of a real instrument that won't come out through that plug-in, including what your hands are doing and the noises and all that little things you're doing as a human when you're playing an instrument. All that is in the playing. The same thing when you're playing a trumpet or saxophone or trombone or electric guitar or acoustic guitar or real drums or whatever. There's all the noises and creaks and all these little, playing is all part of the sound of that drum set. But a lot of this will be missing playing a virtual VST drum set, like including the microphone picking up the squeaking of the chair. Like y'all probably can hear I don't know if y'all can hear this chair squeaking behind me now I'm in. All that's being captured. You don't think it is, but it is. So let's see what happens when AI eats AI and then it will water down itself. Just AI is just like it's kind of like with Atmos. They were thinking Atmos was going to be this next full form blown phenomenal thing, and Atmos it still hasn't taken over your traditional stereo recording. It hasn't. Even though I got Atmos, I can do Atmos record, mixing and all that, but Atmos is not the main, because we only have 2 ears. So, let me it's funny. I do these live streams, but then people call me. They know I do these live streams, but they'll call me anyway. So so let me see. Maddie says, obviously, I think EQ are closer than compressor. When it comes to plugins, I would say this. I think when it comes to plugins that are emulating real outboard gear, I think you'll be fine with a plugin on an EQ, a reverb, and a delay. I think the two pieces of gear that still just quite aren't there is definitely preamps and definitely compressors. Other than that, everything else can sound close, really, really close. Let me see what else. I got a few more. Let me see. Matthew Hess says, do I think I could pick out the hardware and the plugs through a blind test? I'm not sure I could. It depends. Once again, compressors, a little bit easier. The thing that would be harder to decipher between a plug-in and a real hardware would be like EQ, reverb, and delays. For the most part. Preamps, yes, definitely. Let me see. Oh, man says Badmus has no relevance for me. Gotcha. And the mixer said, I have no mixes that I have mixed on both, and the ones on the console sound different. Yeah, a lot of times I think when we all record through the console, we all tend to the console tends to have a little bit more presence and depth than just strictly from just the interface to your DAW. That's what I noticed. So let me see what else. We got a lot of points coming in. Yeah, I would feel different for the yeah, for sure. Here's the thing. That's a good point. Jazzy's putting out the point with the emulation of plugins, but do people even care nowadays? Or are they willing to pay for the use of gear? The thing is, 90% of the people that listen to music that are not into the actual what we are, the actual people that have a direct impact to it. I'm talking about recording and studios and all that. Is that they don't know or care to understand the difference in what they're hearing. And the average listener they don't know what an 1176 compressor is, so they're not going to know the difference between a plugin, whether it's come from IK Multimedia, UAD, Soft Toys, or whoever makes the plugin, or an actual Universal 1176 plugin. They don't know what that is. They don't know what it does. They don't care. So they're not going to care if you use the real authentic 1176 or plugin. They don't care. The average listener, all they is, do I like the song I'm listening to? Do I like the artist singing it? They don't care the process of it. So that's the only thing. And I think sometimes people like us is we tend to stress about gear, about certain things that actually doesn't matter. It's like what I was talking about, the name of my topic. If most people are not going to care if it came out of a home recording studio or a commercial studio, as long as they like the music, because you can have all the best gear in a commercial studio, all the best gear in a home recording studio, and the songs are crappy. No one likes the songs. I don't care if you have the best compressors and microphones and preamps and whatever. The song sucks. The song sucks. That's just the way. That's just or if the song is good, the song is good. They don't care where it's recorded. So let me see. Warheart Arts. Okay, yeah, exactly. I see. Well, only certain artists will care about analog details. Yeah, same thing with producers and everything else. That's exactly what we were talking about. Now, why does it matter then? It matters to the people actually doing the work, right? That's who it matters. That's what's important. It's kind of like going to a hair salon, right? You don't care what chemicals and all whatever the person or what clippers or whatever. You don't care about, you know, you don't care about the gear they're using to cut your hair or do your hair or whatever. You don't. I never go to my barber and ask them, man, those are blah blah with clippers with these type of blades and that type of blade speed and that gives you this certain type of cut because of it's got so much voter. You don't ask your barber that unless you're another barber and you want to do like, man, what clippers you using? Yes, you're getting really nice precise haircuts. What clippers you using? Oh, these are the Steel 2000s Model A or whatever. That's what you when you're another barber, as whatever the case. But the client doesn't care. Client just care about having how the haircut comes out. So let me see. Welcome to Secret Studios. Is it all the way? Oh yeah, airborne all the way. Airborne all the way. Jumpers hit it. So let me see. That's exactly what I just said. Andre that's exactly what I was saying. That they don't care. As long as the song is good, that's all they care about. I'm looking to expand my Orion 32. I have a feral fish with 24 mix, but I was wondering if there's something similar quality price point with the DB25 instead of the TRSs. Well, I know with the Orion, the Orion, you got Orion 32 like plus like I got. There are only DB25 cables. There is no TSR connection except for the two mix, the two outputs. That's it. That's the only two. That the only other connections would be Dante and Maddie and all that. But that the Orion is already, especially, it's already 32. It's expandable up to 64 channels through AES. And I don't know if you're running depending on how many channels, if you're running a console that has 32 channels, but the Orion can do 32 channels. Because I'm using a USB cable, I got 24. It's set up automatically for 24. And every output on my Orion 1 through 24 is on channels 1 through 24 on my console here. So I don't if you're running unless you're running Elo, other than Orion, they have a large, they have a interface that does 64 channels. So I don't know if you would want to expand to a feral fish versus getting, swapping out that analog Orion to the other one. I drawn a blank on the name of it, but there's one that does 64 outputs. But for me, 32 was more than enough for what I do. It's almost like, back in the day when they were using when they were doing 24, they had a 24 track tape machine. Well, 24 track tape machine has 24 tracks on it, which means that's 24 channels. And that's all you needed. So to have 24 returns, sometimes with inline console, like this is a split console, right? So I got it in a split configuration. So I do my recording on one side and I do my returns on this side. There are consoles that can do inline, where you can, like my MX8000 is an inline console. So it really depends. But are you saying Maddie is what you're going for? So it's kind of like it really depends on how much multi-tracking you want to do. Are you going to do 32? You can do 40, 48 channels of multi-tracking. Pretty good. Mix Club said, good night, folks. Okay, good night, Mix Club. Thanks for interacting. I'm not going to be over here much longer myself. But it really depends. So I miss Maddie too. Said, well, kind of like eating in a restaurant. If food tastes good, it's good. I don't care who made how. Yeah, it's like with the cook. If you go to a restaurant, you don't go, and talk to the chef, even though we know the chefs or the cooks are the one that made the food. You just like, oh, the food is good. That's the first thing come to your mind. Let's see, I've been here on my civilian account. I keep chatting and felt ignored, but it was a problem. And YouTube, let's see. I kept chatting and felt ignored, but it was a problem with YouTube. Gotcha. Well, you're not ignored here. I try to acknowledge everyone here on this channel. So you're not ignored here, Warheart. Welcome. Like I said, always welcome. Yep. Everybody's like I said, we're all reiterating the same thing. It is what is pin on warm audio compressors with tube mobs. I don't know. I don't have any warm audio compressors, but I would imagine, so there's some people that do tube like me. Most of my tube gear, everything that got tubes in it, have been upgraded. I like, for example, I've definitely used got rid of a lot of those Chinese tubes, and I put at least Mueller tubes, these 128X7 tubes. I'm doing that. That's the first thing I do. I don't care, whether it's my even my little art I use for my live stream, my little tube MP, which stands for mic pre, little small preamp. I've changed the tube in that. I just, does it make a big difference? Who knows? Some people swear it do. Some people say, well, it's not really the tubes that make the difference. It's really more of the transformers and the op amps that you'll hear a bigger difference. But, I change them anyway. If you can change them, it's like I've upgraded my tubes in my Antelope. I mean, not my Antelope, my drawing a blank on my own gear, my Avalons. I've changed the tubes in that. That's the same thing. Only I haven't changed the tubes in my Universal 610 preamp, which I'm going to do. So let me see what else we got going on. The Galaxy, I see. Okay, yeah. The Antelope Galaxy. Oh, he says out of your price point. Here's the thing too, when it comes to DAWs and using multiple different interfaces. Sometimes the DAW won't recognize but one interface at a time. So it really is really dependent on your DAW. But like I said, having an Antelope Orion 32 like I have the Gen 3 version, even though there's a Gen 4. It does more than enough inputs and outputs for me. So, but like I said, going to Maddie or Dante will give you more inputs and outputs. Some people want to use that, especially if they use a larger input and output stage box or whatever. It really depends what you're trying to record. So let me see. Got a few more, and then I'm gonna cut it short myself. Let's see. Let's. Yeah, RCA. Yeah, R12AX RCAs, Black Plate Ds, Gator. Yep, the 12BHS. Yeah, gotcha. Different companies with those different tubes. I would say that's what I replaced them on. Yeah, Mollards or anything like that. So, Max said, I'd like to get another LA610. I have used that. I used to have one. Solid unit. Yeah, I got one. I got a associate friend of mine that swears by them. He loves those 610s. I have the 610 Mark II. If you know about the regular 610s, they were silver. The Mark IIs are black. That's what I got. Do DSP accelerators make a big difference? In other words, you got because DSP, digital signal processing, um, especially if it'll help lessen the load on your PC or Mac for sure. If you're going to use that internal processing through your that, but some people are using third-party plugins instead of using that internal DSP processing like you would in like for example a Universal Audio, UAD with their gear and their internal DSP processing. So let me see what else we got. Andre says ASIO for all can allow PC to see more than one audio interface, or Mac can create. Yeah, it's true. It just sucks that like I was using Cakewalk and they stopped recognizing ASIO for all, which is now they got the new sonar coming out, so I'm gonna see if they remedied that problem, or y'all know what I'm trying to say. I'm stumbling on my words, which sucks, because ASIO for all, I was using that for a long time. Yeah, you can. Let's see. Oh, okay. How do I feel about analog summing from Dangerous Music? You have an analog board, so people for people like me in a small setting, I wonder if I think analog summing would work great, especially if you're going to use outboard gear. But really, technically, it really, to me, doesn't make you don't make a whole lot of sense if you're just going to go come out of your interface to go through an analog mixer just to go right back in and not incorporate any outboard gear. You might as well just stay in the box. That's my thought on it. So on the analog summing, because a lot of times you're just summing a bunch of everything into one master channel, the print. And they're making consoles like that, which they're overcharging people for summing mixers like that. That Neve, I think it's the Neve 8024, something like that. 20 or the 8424, whatever it's called. It was like they only give you 2 mic pre's, no EQ, no nothing else. And it's like $20,000. And like where you're getting the Neve sound, like, but the console's only about 10% of the mix. It's not a whole lot of, if you have a solid front end recording, you're not gonna hear a gigantic difference going through that mixer. I think that's why they don't hear about it very much anymore. Because they know this. Sometimes you gotta be careful with these companies like SSL and Neve and all that. They'll put out gear. The untrained unknown they will gravitate towards stuff like that. Didn't they realize when you have a person that knows how this works, they can see through it. They're like, oh no, that's not a good deal. But the unknown, untrained person would think that's an amazing console. Like, no, it's not. You'll be better off $20,000, or let's say I found a used AMEC 40 channel console for $8,000 on Reverb. You're going to get a lot more out of that AMEC. One that has actual mic pre's per channel and actually have EQs per channel. It may not have dynamics, but you can always insert dynamics. But that Neve 8424, whatever they're trying to sell you, that's a ripoff. So let's see. Yeah, like I was saying, ASIO says also ASIO can support multiple interfaces now. Yeah, I know the ASIO for all could. Now I don't know if they changed it. Oh, Andrew said, I remember FireWire that could connect every, especially a Mac with FireWire. But it's too bad that they didn't, because they jumped to USB 3 and Thunderbolt and all that. You would think they would have improved the FireWire. But it's one of those protocols that, they felt the USB 3 was faster. So yeah, everyone knows USB stands for Universal Serial Bus. They feel they can move more data over USB because they can, it's 4 times as fast as USB 2, or Thunderbolt when it comes to moving data. Let's see what else. Let's see. Also consider trying an aggregate setup between interface on Mac. Any experience with that? Tips, concern? Well, I have right now on my Mac. All I have right now is I got 2 Motu 896 HD Marketer Unicorn converters that I do for the Mac. But other than that, everything else I have is pretty much just one standard interface. That's why I didn't want to run to. There are people that will run multiple 8-channel interfaces, but then you got to, you start to worry about having your word clock and syncing, and I didn't want to run into those issues, and so I just kind of stick with, if I can get an interface to have enough I/O, I prefer to go that route. That's just me. I hope if that answered your question. Let's see. Warhart said, I've heard of phase rotating from different interfaces. I don't know. I've never heard of that. But let me look that up. I have to write that down. Phase rotating. Because a lot of times with phasing, everyone, phase is really, if you think about phase in general, this is the reason, let's talk about phasing with microphones and why you got to worry about phase issues with microphone. Phases, you got one thing trying to cancel the other out. So how can I, let's see. So it's kind of like why you want to reverse phase, so something's not canceling each other out. I guess that's the best way I can describe it without going into a whole lot of details on that. But that's the first I've heard of phase rotating when it comes to interfaces. Most people versus but like I said, be something I need to research on. Let's see, Elliot says one more. Do you think the average listener or even a pro could hear a full mix and say, hey, they use plugins? No. And I'll tell you why. The reason why you're not going to hear a distinctive difference between, let's say, a 1176 plugin or an actual 1176 is because there's too much stuff going on in the mix. You got kick drum, you got a snare, maybe multiple snares, maybe multiple kicks, hi-hat. You got other percussion instruments going on in this mix. You got the bass sounds going. You got keys going on. You got all these different sounds from keys. You got guitar sounds going on. You got if you got guitars in there, you got strings or horn sounds. You got background vocals, and on top of that, you got different reverb units going on, delays, doublers, all these different effects going on. You got EQs on every channel. You got different compressors on each channel. You got stuff on your bus channels. You got stuff on your master bus. You got an EQ on your master bus. You got this a compressor on your master bus. All this stuff is going on at the exact same time, and that's on the processing portion of it. And that's not, I hadn't even went through what they're going to do when it's time to master. And there's more EQs and compressors and stuff like that in the mastering. So you're not going to pick out anyone that sit there and say, oh, they used the revision D 1176 on a snare. They're lying. They're lying. It's too much stuff going on. Unless the engineer, they basically, they had so much compression, like they're almost to a point where they're limiting. They had this compressor going where it was so compressed that was obvious it was 1176. on like a snare. Sometimes they'll do like a maybe 8-to-1 ratio, with a very fast attack, where you can hear it. But other than that, it's too much stuff going on in mixes, especially when you got songs that have 40 tracks. It's just too much stuff going on to hear that. I know that was kind of a long answer. Let me see. Oh, yeah, Warren said not phase inversion, but lesser rotate. Gotcha. Like I said, on that phase rotate, I'm gonna check that out. That's the first I've heard of that, especially for interfaces, but I'm gonna check that out. See what else. Oh yeah, listen to the song. And yeah, exactly. That's why it's kind of like, let me tell you how hard it is to distinguish mixes and gear. You got people that can, like, for example, if you're going to listen to some tracks right now, and let's say a lot of these recording studios have already shut down and closed and sold their gear on some of these artists you listen to, because a lot of times when we think of these recording studios, we'll think of the main ones we know, like East West or Ocean Way, Westlake, Electric Lady, the Hit Factory or whatever, right? The big name ones that we hear all the time, not realizing that over the 30 plus years, 40, 50 plus years of artists recording studios, thousands of recording studios have closed down, and not every one of those recording studios that were using an SSL, NEVA, and API. Some of these recording studios were using an Harrison, some of them were using a Helios, some were using an MCI, some were using a Euphonics, some of them were using Tascam, some were using Sony, and the list just goes on and on and on. And that's just the consoles. That's not even talking about the control room, the live room, the acoustics, the outboard gears. We might be thinking they were using a LA2A when they were using a retro compressor on vocals. We just don't know. But when it's done right, the first thing, you're not going to distinguish an API from a Neve. You're not. Or an SSL. You're just not. People swarping now you will, but no, you're not. It's just too much stuff going on. What you will distinguish is how well it's recorded, how good the music sound, how good the song, you like the song. Listening, because the one thing that stands out in most songs when we listen to it is the vocals, because that's how we remember the songs, is the vocals. But we won't distinguish that they used a Royal 121 ribbon microphone on a guitar cabinet that had in a live room that had a gobo. You're not going to hear that. You're just not. But what they're all doing is they're using techniques to get a good recording and a good mixing. That's the one thing that is ubiquitous about this whole process, is getting a good recording and a good mix and a good master that makes it industry standard. That is common. That's what we do here. So let me see. Oh, it says Secret Studio. I appreciate you as user Pathfinder. Yeah, I'll talk about Pathfinder because I was talking to someone on my job about, they're going to Pathfinder school. And for those that don't know, the Army got all these schools, other than just joining the Army and going to basic training. You got all these additional schools that you can go. Not everyone get an opportunity to go to these schools. Pathfinder is one of those schools that is just a mind, because there's a lot of math involved, and it's really dealing with drop zones and landing zones for helicopters. And you have to go there and study. And the nomenclature is the first thing that you learn, because you got to know the nomenclature of gear, because you got to know you got to know the name of the gear you're using. And that's one of the biggest failing points in Pathfinder. One of the biggest failing points is the day one test. They teach you only have a couple of hours, and then you got to take this test the same day. And people fell out of that. But it's basically setting up a drop zone and how to survey a drop zone. and it's attention to detail. But anyhow, it's a 3-week school. You get an award, you get some orders, you get an identifier, and you get to wear this badge on your uniform. Say, I went to this school. But Pathfinder, yeah, that's a stressful school because you're trying to pass it, and that's not a very easy school to pass at all. But anyhow, I just saw that because it said Pathfinder. Let me see what else. Gotcha, Andre. I know I was. Okay, I missed something. Okay, I must have missed something. See. Okay. Max, Max, what are you working on at the moment in your studio? Believe it or not, I'm working on a few original tracks, but that I'm working on now. It's July going to August, so we gotta fix a few things for this Christmas CD. But this Christmas CD that y'all probably remember from last year is getting released this year. So there's a few things we gotta fix with that, and it's gonna be ready to release. And you better actually buy this CD. It's getting released this year. That's what I'm working on, as well as some original material that I'm working on, some ideas. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I will do a track where y'all get to hear it. And y'all can tell me what y'all think about the song. So Alias I know where we can hear your music work. You can, believe it or not, I've done a few things on Reverb Nation and SoundCloud. I've uploaded not a whole lot of stuff. There's reason why I don't have a lot of stuff on those, like Songcast and TuneCore and all these, and all that. There's reasons being because, and my explanation can be long, but I can you can find me on Reverb Nation. I believe I was called a Marks. No, I was called a UND Music Production. For those websites like UND Music Production on Reverb Nation, I believe you can find me on there. Because you should be able to find me on that. And I did a couple of tracks. Like I remixed one of Mariah Carey's tracks. I did a remix version of it. Now let me see. Secret Studios. Am I exclusively mixing and mastering? That's because I would love an opportunity to co-write with Morley. No, I actually, believe it or not, I'm not exclusive. I'm not actually exclusive mixing or mastering guy. I'm actually a recording guy. I can mix my stuff, but I'm more into recording and mixing my recording. So all you say is that UND, yeah, it's kind of like let me write it in the chat so you can you'll know. It's like UND Music Production. That should be it. I need to get it. Let me turn on this so I can double check. As soon as I find there it is. I'm gonna see if I can. Okay. There it is. It's a Mac. So you hear that? You wait for that little ping. So my Mac is loading up so I can get on the internet and make sure it's UND Music Production before I get off here. Let me let that load up right quick. So overall, so what do y'all thought? Any more final thoughts on on home recording studio versus the commercial recording studio? Do you think it matters? Would you prefer a commercial studio? Honestly, I would love to have the commercial studio building. I just wouldn't want the commercial studio headaches, like the cost of the building, like the rent and the cost of the overhead and things like that. Unfortunately, sometimes those two and two go hand in hand. But I would definitely love to have a commercial recording studio building set up. Magic says, both if you're a big baller, go to commercial. If you just want to do it yourself, go home. Yeah, that's pretty much that's pretty much kind of like okay, let's see. All right, so Mac is back up. And okay, and I believe I'm gonna let it do a little boot thing on there, load up, So let me see. See, they'll say, how are you sharing your projects if you just doing recording portions? How are you moving large session files right now? Right, like I said, it's right now I'm not moving any large because I'm not sharing files with any other person but me. I'm not collaborating with other producers and artists. So when I work with the artists, they're solely working with me. So that's how I'm doing that. So I'm not worried about the file sharing and all that. And then commercial meaning work. Like for me, I just like the environment because I started in a recording studio when it comes to recording. Even though I just, at home, it's way more convenient because I can walk up in this room anytime I want because this is in my bonus room. I don't have to worry about booking it. And I don't have to worry about getting in because I own it. But that ain't the case with a commercial building. Even though I like commercial, I like the environment. Let's see. Do I ever get into writing, especially lyrics beyond solely composition or track? Yeah, I actually do. The writing and like with lyrics and music and composition is the part I do best. That's the part I do best. And of course, tracking, recording what my ideas. But that's what I do best is the creation of it. So, this commercial space is expensive. It doesn't make sense to throw away the money if you don't have the paying. That's exactly the reason why because sometimes, believe it or not, sometimes you don't have clients because their clients don't have a studio to go to. Even though you and I, we all know that there are millions of people on YouTube, but you think about it. For example, 300 million people in the United States, let's say 20 million of them are into recording music. Well, I only have about 4,000 subscribers on my channel, and I've only have an average about 200 to 300 viewers that, because some people subscribe to the channel, but is emotional. They just, I like the video, and then they never go back and visit the channel anymore. So I only have about 200 or 300 subscribers that are actual 100% faithful. They follow me and been following me for years. Even though I have a 4,000 subscriber count, majority of them people have left. They don't even watch the channel. So for messages like mine getting out when I only have 300, 400, 500 views or whatever the case, it's the same thing with the recording studio business there. Believe it or not, Nashville, as an example, stays busy with people going to recording studios down there. Berry Hill alone has 40 recording studios in it, and they're always booked. It's that many people booking recording studios in Nashville. So I think, honestly, the recording studio still has a place for people that still want to go to recording studio. You'll be amazed. there are lots of people that still believe that's the only way they're going to get a top-notch record is to go to a recording studio. So now, see, Don Gordon, how you say? I'm good. Like I said, been on this going on 2 hours. We're talking about home recording studio and commercial studios. So, yep. So let me see. Okay. Let me quit. Okay, let me see. Google. As soon as there we go. Let me see if I can type it in and find it. UND Music Production. I'm gonna go Reverb Nation. Let me see what pops up. Or let me see. No, I guess I'm not popping up. Let's see what pops up on SoundCloud. It's not popping up. Let me see what's popping up on SoundCloud. Oh yeah, now yeah. If you do UND Music Productions space SoundCloud, I pop up. Yep, I pop up immediately. Yep, I pop up immediately. So UND Music Production space SoundCloud, and I'll pop up. Let's see. What else? So would I be open to starting lyrical co-writing? I'm always open. I'm always open. But I always say this when it comes to co-writing, we definitely got to hash out all the legalities. We're talking copyright, split sheets, and all that. You definitely want to get all that type of stuff out of the way first, because this is what happened when I was working with a couple in DC, and they, and they're like, they understand, yeah, you want to be friends and all that, and all that, but at the time, there's still, you got to protect yourself, because what was happening is they were trying to take the music to other sources. They were going to try to take the music to other sources. And I'm like, no, that ain't how. You just don't take someone else's music to other sources trying to fish to try to get your stuff funded for your project. You can't work like that. That ain't how anyone works. So that's how we kind of fell out. We got the, because if you're like me, I can listen to a track. It don't have to be my track. But if you're like me, I can get an idea of coming up with something original by listening to someone else's music, and then all of a sudden my idea sounds close to theirs, but I come up with my own version of it, and now I just basically kind of like, how the word stole, you hear, and stole, I kind of hold their music. I kind of stole their music, because I heard it, so I kind of hold their music. Stole, I don't know if that's a word. And I don't want that to happen, because that happens all the time. Somebody can create a beat on whatever. And they're like, man, I like that. And I'm go back and listen to it. I remember that, and they create their own version of it. And the thing is, when you create something totally different, that's how you can, copyright. That's how copyrights work. So I was like, no, we're not doing that. That's why I don't want people to hear. Because they can, you'll be amazed how people can steal your stuff without stealing your stuff, if that makes sense. So, oh yeah, Warren said, cool, Mark. We was all wondering. Yeah, you can go to SoundCloud and listen to. Yeah, these are tracks, and that's just a few. Probably, let me see. Some of the tracks came from the album A Different Taste in '94. Majority of them did, and then a couple of them are remixes. Like if you listen to, I'm gonna remix that one. It's called My Everything Remix by Layla Hathaway. That song is actually a fast dance track, but I kind of turned it into a slow version of it. You can listen to that. It's called My Everything. It's the Layla Hathaway. You'll see her. I did the music on that. Most of the songs from a different taste. So, yeah. And of course, when I get done with the Christmas album, I'm gonna upload it up to SoundCloud. A couple of tracks from. So, but there you go. There you go. SoundCloud. There you go. Let's see. Let me see. They'll say, would you want to deal with raw spirits that telltales beats rap music? It sounds good on the song, but it doesn't mean that you want Ray coming over to rap on the weekend, right? Like I said, for me, here's the thing with rap and hip hop and all that, and someone that might want to do that. They say they see me on YouTube, man, I want to get together, and they're hip hop or whatever. I'm not hip hop. I'm not the person you want to work with. Even if you might like the channel, like, man, he seems cool. I want to work, I am the wrong person to do hip hop. You need a hip hop studio music producer to work with. I am an R&B guy. I'm an old school R&B guy. So if you're into old school R&B, I'm the perfect person to work with on that. If you like 90s R&B, 80s R&B, 70s R&B, stuff like that, I'm the perfect person to work with. But if you're into trap, modern hip hop, whatever, I'm not the person to work with. Some people say, because they say I got an MPC, you must. No, I don't. I actually don't. Oh yeah, someone said about concern. Yeah, it is a concern. That's why I'm not an open studio. That's why I won't, just bring people off the street. Even though I got 1 million cameras in my house. And I can, I got cameras watching my driveway, but still, but y'all know that's how Jam Master Jay got killed in his recording studio in New York, because he was dealing with some shady people. They were shady, and he ended up getting killed. So you gotta be careful. See this, I would be helping someone, right? But like I said, it just depends. Let's see. Okay. Oh, Max, I'm a 90s rock guy too. And I believe it or not, I actually would be more willing to, because I know 90s rock as well. That would be easier for me to do than to do like modern hip hop. I'm not into it. You'd be better off. I would be better off doing 80s and 90s hip hop than I would be modern, like 2020s hip. I just don't like 2020s hip hop. I just don't. They call it mumble rap and all. I just don't. I'm not into it. Like I said, the artist people that I deal with, because I know them personally, so that's the reason why. So Elliot says that's what I do: 90s and 2000s hip hop. I can do a 90s hip hop. I'm not even too sure about 2000 hip hop, but I definitely could do 90s hip hop. That's when, I kind of like one of the rappers that I liked a lot, which was a shame that he got killed, was Tupac. One of my albums that I like by him a lot is Me Against the World. Me Against the World. I love that album by Tupac. Stuff like that. Yeah, but still, he said Jim Master didn't get killed because of someone he was recording. He got killed because he tried to shut someone out of a drug deal. So, well, whatever. Like I said, whatever it was shady. So, which you don't want to get involved with either. So I just know that the whole thing was shady with Jam Master Jay. But I'm glad you kind of cleared it up, because I've been wondering that, because he got killed in what, 2000, 2001, and it's a shame, you know. So deal say, so you gotta, so you're saying I gotta co-write some updated Chuck Berry Conway Twitty to work with you? No, no. Earl Shine Eddie Murphy as a buddy. No, what I'm saying is I'm a 90s guy. So if you're looking to do modern 2020s trap music, I'm the wrong person. That's what I'm saying. But if you're looking to do like 90s, like, you know, Portrait or Intro or groups like that, you know, Next, or, you know, TLC, Jade, SWV, groups, you know, I know you were joking. That's what I do. So other than that, once again, I appreciate everyone. It is over 2 hours. It's been over 2 hours, and I'm about to shut it down. I'm gonna see if they answer the phone. They might not because it's late. So I need, you know, see what, you know, call them back. But this is always fun. You know, getting y'all your perspective on the home recording studio versus the commercial recording studio. We all are doing a home recording studio. Even Joe Carell has a home. Just same with Warren Hewitt has a home recording studio. Even some of the biggest producers out there have a home recording studio. Even though they still go to commercial studios, but the home recording studio it's so much convenient. But I like commercial recording studios because that's what I started in. It's just they're so unaffordable, you know. So that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. I was kind of inspired by going down to Columbia Studios the other day, and it was nice to go in there and be in a commercial studio. But I love being home because I can be here anytime I want. So we'll see y'all on the next live stream. And we'll go from there. Like I said, I'm still using my webcam. I got to get this other camera up. I'm gonna play around with it. So we're gonna see y'all next time. So if I hear Conway Twitty mix, I know that was you. Yep, I sure will. Hello, darling. It's good to see you. It's been a good time. Oh, ain't that what his song on that Conway Twitty wanted? Oh, Lord Jesus. Anyhow, I'll see y'all next time, and y'all have a great one.